This is AP Environmental Science, Chapter 1, Environmental Problems, Their Causes, and Sustainability. This lecture will cover Section 3, Why do we have environmental problems? There are two key concepts for this section. The first, major causes of environmental problems are population growth, unsustainable resource use, poverty, avoidance of full cost pricing, and increasing isolation from nature. The second, our environmental worldviews play a key role in determining whether we live unsustainably or more sustainably. Experts have identified several causes of environmental problems. According to a number of environmental and social scientists, the major causes of environmental problems we face are population growth, wasteful and unsustainable resource use, poverty, failure to include the harmful environmental costs of goods and services in their market prices, and increasing isolation from nature. We will discuss each of these causes in detail throughout the text. However, let us begin with a brief overview of them. The human population is growing at a rapid rate. Exponential growth occurs when a quantity, such as the human population, increases at a fixed percentage per unit of time. For example, 1% or 2% per year. Exponential growth starts off slowly, but after only a few doublings, it grows to enormous numbers because each doubling is twice the total of all earlier growth. Here is an example of the immense power of exponential growth. Fold a piece of paper in half to double its thickness. If you could continue doubling the thickness of the paper 50 times, it would be thick enough to almost reach the sun, 150 million kilometers or 93 million miles away. Hard to believe, isn't it? The human population has been growing exponentially. There are now about 7.1 billion people on the earth, with about 84 million more added each year. There could be 9.6 billion of us by 2050. This is projected addition of 2.5 billion more people within your lifetime and is more than 8 times the current U.S. population and 2 times that of China, which is the world's most populous nation. Throughout the course, we will discuss exponential and logistic growth. We will also learn to calculate both. However, when visually picturing exponential growth, you should know that exponential growth would represent the J-curve. Shown by the red line, throughout time, the population will continue to rise. Eventually, it will pass the carrying capacity, which shows exponentially growing. As mentioned, the population will start slow, begin to double, and within each doubling time, it will continue to exceed the limit that we could hold. No one knows how many people the Earth can support indefinitely, and at what level of average resource consumption per person, without seriously degrading the ability of the Earth to support us, our economies, and the millions of other forms of life. However, our expanding total and per capita ecological footprints are disturbing warning signs. We could slow population growth with the goal of having it level off at around 8 billion by 2050, as suggested, instead of growing to 9.6 billion or more. Some ways to do this include reducing poverty through economic development, promoting family planning, and elevating the status of women. As mentioned, exponential growth of the human population has happened throughout history. Referencing this chart, which is outdated, will show you the red line of human population and numbers of populations in the billions throughout time. assuming that you can see where human population increases, would show the exponential growth curve. Before humans were truly on Earth and began expanding, the population was quite low, and this includes the population of all species. When humans and future populations and species were introduced, the exponential growth more than doubled, more than tripled. In fact, it began to quadruple within a matter of years. Imagine what it would be like in 2050 if you were looking at 5.6 billion in 1994. Affluence has harmful and beneficial environmental effects. The lifestyles of many consumers in more developed countries and in less developed countries, such as China and India, are built on growing affluence, which results in high levels of resource consumption and the resulting environmental degradation, waste, and pollution. These harmful environmental effects of affluence can be dramatic. In its 2012 Living Planet report, the World Wildlife Fund estimated that the United States is responsible for almost half of the global ecological footprint. The average American consumes about 30 times as much as the average Indian and 100 times as much as the average person in the world's poorest countries. According to some ecological footprint estimates, it takes about 27 large tractor-trailer loads of resources per year to support one typical American, and in 2012, there were 315 million Americans. The problem is that providing each of these tractor-trailer loads represents environmental degradation, such as air pollution and water pollution from factories and motor vehicles, and land degradation from the mining of raw materials used to make the products we consume. This is why higher levels of consumption expand a person's ecological footprint. Another downside to wealth is that it allows affluent consumers to obtain their resources from almost anywhere in the world without seeing the harmful environmental and health impacts of their high consumption lifestyles. On the other hand, affluence can allow for better education, which can lead people to become more concerned about environmental quality. It also provides money for developing technologies to reduce pollution, environmental degradation, and resource waste. As a result, in the United States and in most other affluent countries, the air is clearer, drinking water is purer, and most rivers and lakes are cleaner than they were in the 1970s. In addition, the food supply is more abundant and safer. The incidence of life-threatening infectious diseases has been greatly reduced, lifespans are longer, and some endangered species are being rescued from extinction, hastened by human activities. These improvements in environmental quality were achieved because of greatly increased scientific research and technological advances financed by affluence. Education also spurred many citizens to insist that businesses and governments work toward improving environmental quality. Poverty has harmful environmental and health effects. Poverty is a condition in which people are unable to fulfill their basic needs for adequate food, water, shelter, healthcare, and education. According to the World Bank, about 900 million people, almost 3 times the U.S. population, live in extreme poverty, struggling to live on the equivalent of less than $1.25 a day. This is less than what many people spend for a bottle of water or a cup of coffee. About 1 of every 3, or 2.6 billion of the world's people population, struggle to live on less than $2.25 a day. Could you do that? Poverty causes a number of harmful environmental and health effects. The daily lives of the world's poorest people are focused on getting enough food, water, and cooking and heating fuel to survive. Desperate for short-term survival, these individuals collectively degrade forests, topsoil, grasslands, fisheries, and wildlife. They do not have all the luxury of worrying about long-term environmental quality or sustainability. Even though the poor in less developed countries are very, very resourceful people, the large population size in some countries lead to a high overall environmental impact. However, poverty does not necessarily lead to environmental degradation. Some of the world's poor people have learned how to take care of their environment as part of their long-term survival strategy. For example, many small-scale farmers in African countries plant and nurture trees and work to conserve the soils that they depend on. While poverty can increase some types of environmental degradation, the reverse is also true. Pollution and environmental degradation have a severe impact on the poor and can worsen their poverty. Consequently, many of the world's poor people die prematurely from several preventable health problems. One such problem is malnutrition, caused by a lack of protein and other nutrients needed for good health. The resulting weakened condition can increase an individual's chances of death from starvation and normally non-fatal ailments such as diarrhea and measles. A second health problem is limited access to adequate sanitation facilities and clean drinking water. More than 1/3 of the world's population have no real bathroom facilities and are forced to use backyards, alleys, ditches, and streams. As a result, about 1 of every 8 of the world's population get water for drinking, washing, and cooking from sources polluted by human and animal feces. A third health problem is severe respiratory disease that people get from breathing the smoke of open fires or poorly vented stoves used for heating and cooking inside their dwellings. This indoor air pollution kills about 2.4 million people a year, according to the World Health Organization. In 2010, the World Health Organization estimated that one or more of these factors, mostly related to poverty, cause premature death for about 7 million children under the age of 5 each year. Some hopeful news is that this number of annual deaths is down from about 10 million in 1990. Even so, every day an average of at least 19,000 young children die prematurely from these causes. This is equivalent to 95 fully loaded 200-passenger airlines crashing every day with no survivors. The news media rarely covers this ongoing human tragedy. Prices of goods and services do not include harmful environmental costs. Another basic cause of environmental problems has to do with how goods and services are priced in the marketplace. Companies using resources to provide goods for consumers generally do not require to pay for most of the harmful environmental and health costs of supplying such goods. For example, timber companies pay the costs of clear-cutting trees but do not pay for the resulting environmental degradation and loss of wildlife habitat. The primary goal of a company is to maximize profits for its owners or stockholders. Indeed, it would be economic suicide for a company to add these costs to its prices unless government regulations were to create a level of economic playing field by using taxes or regulations to require all businesses to pay for the environmental and health costs of producing their products. Because the prices of goods and services do not include most of their harmful environmental and human health costs, consumers really have no effective way to evaluate the harmful effects on their own health and on the Earth's life support systems of producing and using these goods and services. For example, producing and using gasoline result in air pollution and other problems that damage the environment and people's health. Scientists and economists have estimated that the real cost of gasoline to U.S. consumers would be about $3.18 per liter, which is about $12 per gallon, if the estimated short and long-term harmful environmental and health costs were included in its pump at the price. Partly because of this inadequate pricing system, many people don't understand the importance and truly high value of the natural resources and natural services that make up the Earth's natural capital. This lack of information is a major reason for why we are degrading these key components of our life support system. Another problem arises when governments or taxpayers give companies subsidies such as tax breaks and payments to assist them with using resources to run their businesses. This helps to create jobs and stimulate economies, but environmentally harmful subsidies encourage the depletion and degradation of natural capital. We could live more sustainably by finding ways to include in the market prices and harmful environmental health costs of the goods and services we use. Implementing such fuel cost pricing would be a way to apply one of the 3 social science principles of sustainability. 2 ways to do this over the next 2 decades would be to shift from environmentally harmful government subsidies to environmentally beneficial subsidies, and then to tax pollution and waste heavily while reducing taxes on income and wealth. We are increasingly isolated from nature. Today, 3 out of 4 people in the more developed countries and 1 of every 2 people in the world live in urban areas. And this shift from rural to urban living is continuing at a rapid pace. Our artificial urban environments are increasing use of cell phones, computers, and other electronic devices help isolate us from the natural world that provides us with food, water, and most of the raw materials used to produce the consumer goods that we depend on. Thus, it's not really surprising that many people don't know the full story of where their food, water, and other goods come from. Similarly, many people are unaware of the amounts of waste and pollutants they produce, where they go, and how these wastes and pollutants affect the environment. Many don't understand that life on Earth has been sustained largely by the recycling of waste, which is one of the other scientific principles of sustainability. According to some analysts, many of us are increasingly suffering from nature-deficient disorders. They suggest that by not having enough contacts with the natural world, a person can be more likely to suffer from stress, have health problems, show unwarranted irritability or aggression, and be less adaptable to changes in life. These analysts also argue that this disorder helps to explain why we are rapidly degrading our life support system. They ask, how will we shrink our ecological footprints and live more sustainably if we don't experience and understand our utter dependence on the Earth's natural systems and the natural capacity and capital that they provide for us? They have a point. People have different views about different environmental problems and their solutions. Another challenge we face is that people differ over the seriousness of the world's environmental problems and what we should do to help solve them. Differing opinions about environmental problems and solutions arise mostly out of the differing environmental worldviews. Your environmental worldview is your set of assumptions and values reflecting on how you think that the world works and what you think your role in the world should be. Environmental ethics, which is the study of our various beliefs about what is right and wrong with how we treat the environment, provides important ways to examine our worldviews. Here are some important ethical questions relating to the environment. Why should we care about the environment? Are we the most important beings on the planet, or are we just one of the Earth's millions of different forms of life? Do we have an obligation to see that our activities do not cause the extinction of other species? Should we try to protect all species, or only some? How do we decide which ones to protect? Do we have an ethical obligation to pass on to future generations the extraordinary natural world in a condition that is at least as good as what we inherited? Should every person be entitled to equal protection from environmental hazards regardless of their race, gender, age, national origin, income, social class, or any other factor? That's the central ethical and political issue for what's known as environmental justice movement. And overall, how do we promote sustainability? People with widely differing environmental worldviews can take the same data, be logically consistent with it, and arrive at quite different answers to such questions because they start with different assumptions and moral, ethical, or religious beliefs. There are three major worldviews. The first is the planetary management worldview. It holds that we are separate and in charge of nature, that nature exists mainly to meet our needs and increasing wants, and that we can use our ingenuity and technology to manage the Earth's life support systems, mostly for our benefits into the distant future. The second worldview is the stewardship worldview. It holds that we can and should manage the Earth for our benefit, but that we have an ethical responsibility to be caring and responsible managers or stewards of the Earth. It says that we should encourage environmentally beneficial forms of economic growth and development and discourage environmentally harmful forms. And the third worldview is environmental wisdom worldview. It holds that we are part of and dependent on nature, and that the Earth's life support system exists for all species, not just for us. According to this view, our success depends on learning how the Earth sustains itself and integrating such environmental wisdom into the ways that we think and act. And this concludes this section of AP Environmental Science. Feel free to go through looking at any other environmental lectures that you may need. And remember that they are all provided on the platform.